All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking about real music in real time for real people, just like you right there, and just like me here. So, did Journey plagiarize themselves on their latest single? That is the topic of this video. And I was inspired by a DJ over on the East Coast of Florida who says, new Journey song sounds oddly similar to one of their biggest hits. Now, this is probably a station that plays one of their biggest hits over and over and over again. And she's claiming that Journey's latest single called Don't Give Up on Us sounds a lot like Separate Ways. And I remember when I first heard the new song, I said, yeah, I hear frontiers. I hear some frontiers on this, and maybe my brain was connecting to Separate Ways. Here's the thing. There is this crunchy guitar at the beginning. Separate Ways, by the way, opens with a much more robust keyboard intro than Don't Give Up on Us does, although they both intro with keyboards, right? And then you have the crunchy guitar part. One of the big differences, though, between the two songs is the tempo of each song, whereas Separate Ways is pretty up-tempo. Don't Give Up on Us is more mid-tempo. And obviously, after the intro, which isn't exactly the same, but is reminiscent of Separate Ways, the songs kind of go their own separate ways. Sorry. Anyway, this is what Neil Sean said about the song. He said, it's a very melodic song. It's soulful, coming from a more R&B place. He says a little more Motown sounding. I don't know about that, but it definitely rocks. I feel like it's got Journey all over it. Now, remember a few weeks ago when Journey put out Let It Rain back on May 17th, which to me is a throwback to the pre-Steve Perry era. Now, I had people saying to me, well, who was singing in Journey before Steve Perry? And I'm like, Greg Raleigh? There were people that were asking me this question, and I'm like, so you didn't know that there was a singer prior to Steve Perry? At one point, Steve and Greg were both in the band together. And by the way, that's kind of a testimony to the fact that you don't hear Feeling That Way or Anytime on the radio anymore. You don't hear Just the Same Way. Those are both tunes where Greg and Steve were on lead vocals together, which I think is a real tragedy. A lot of the hardcore critics believe that that synthesis between those two guys was the pinnacle, was the peak of Journey's greatness. I don't know if I'm completely on board with that, but you can't really argue with albums like Infinity and Evolution. They're both great records and deserve your attention if you haven't listened to them already. And then there's the stuff that came prior to those albums, Look Into the Future and Next, and their self-titled debut, all featuring the fantastic Greg Raleigh. In case you didn't know, Greg Raleigh also sang the song Evil Ways by Santana and Black Magic Woman as well. So Greg Raleigh was a legitimately big-time vocalist with Santana and later on with Journey. A lot of people, though, didn't like Let It Rain. They were like, nope, that doesn't sound like Journey. I don't know why they would release that. It's horrible. Let's move on to the next song. So the band decided to move on to the next song. And the new song, quite honestly, is their strongest song since probably the Revelation album, which again, that was the first album with Arnell on lead vocals. And I believe that to be almost a start to finish brilliant record. Eclipse would come later, but to me, Revelation is the stronger album for traditional Journey fans, whereas Eclipse is a stronger album for the fans that wanted maybe I don't know, something a little bit different. Maybe they wanted Neil to stretch out a bit, which he does on Eclipse. And you're going to get, I think, an all of the above approach on this new record, where you hear things that sound instinctively like Journey, and then you hear other things that certainly push the boundaries of what you'd expect from Journey, which for a fan just kind of perusing around, looking for some new music to hear, I would think that is overall a win. I still think there's a ton of Arnell bias that's built into everything. To just say, hey, this sounds a lot like Separate Ways, then you know what I say to this DJ? I say, are you guys playing it? Is it on the radio? Because fans would dig this, right? Because you're playing Separate Ways 5 times a day. Why don't you put on the new Journey song? Why don't you do a twofer, right? In the old days, you used to hear twofers. You could have two for Tuesday, or you'd have a two for weekend or whatever. And every so often, these classic rock, classic hits stations revisit some of these creative ideas just because somebody in the corporation says, yeah, fine. We're not really looking for ratings during this time period or something. So do what you want to do. If you want to do the twofers, we'll tell you which twofers to play, right? They're not going to actually allow a twofer with Separate Ways and Don't Give Up on Us, right? They're not going to do that because that's too risky. Because this new song, you know, it's from this new album, and we don't play new stuff from old bands, even if it's familiar sounding to the listener. So my question is, she says it's oddly similar, oddly, like that's weird. Like, gee, doesn't the band have anything else to do? Can't they be more creative than, you know, sort of plagiarizing themselves? Look, bands do this all the time. Remember the Doobie Brothers back in the late 80s, their big comeback with Tom Johnston. I was so happy he was back in the band. I'm a big Michael McDonald fan, but here's the deal. If you're a hardcore Doobies fan, you had to be really excited for Tom Johnston to come back into that band and to make them a rock and roll band again, rather than just this kind of mid-tempo R&B band. Now, again, I love all of the Michael McDonald work, but so the Doobies come back in the late 80s with this album called Cycles, right? And it did really well over on rock radio, thanks to a tune called The Doctor. Now, The Doctor was a blatant ripoff of China Grove. Nobody who has, normal hearing would tell you otherwise. The keyboard intro, however, to the song's credit, it does go in a different musical direction, but it borrows a lot from China Grove. So people felt comfortable, like, okay, this is the Doobs, they're back. They're also kind of saying, not only are we back, but we're back to the old way we used to be. That's what they were saying. They're making a dual statement, like, not only is this song going to be familiar to you, but we're going back to our heyday. We're going back to 1973. And I think a lot of people were excited about that. Now, for those of you who have, basically nothing good to say about Journey, like this song, Let It Rain, doesn't sound like Journey. That first song they put out last year didn't really sound like Journey. Okay, this one really sounds like Journey. It sounds so much like Journey that you've got DJs saying, this is just another version of Separate Ways. Go listen to the song. Again, after that crunchy guitar intro, the keyboard part, the crunchy guitar, the tune kind of hangs in its own place. And musically, it doesn't really go where Separate Ways goes. There's no crazy Tarzan note at the end. I mean, Separate Ways is like this powerhouse, up-tempo, Steve Perry howling at the moon, whereas this song is more mid-tempo, basically trying to tell whoever the character is in this song to give me a chance, to not give up. And Arnell, by the way, is great on this record. I know there's an Arnell bias. There forever will be, no matter how unfair that might seem to Arnell fans. And here's the thing about Journey. they've kind of overcome the Steve Perry problem because it's been so long. 1998 is the last time Steve Perry was in this band. And technically, it was 1996 or 1997 when he was really active in the band. You know, when he was doing stuff with the band, that was Trial by Fire. And actually, I would say it was 96 when he was last truly active in the group. In 97, the band wanted to tour. They waited. And you know the rest of the story because I've told it at least 100 times, maybe more. But what I'm, I guess, happy about is Journey can still be Journey. You know, Journey was Journey with Steve Augeri. Journey was even Journey with my buddy Jeff Scott Soto in the group for 11 months. They still sounded great, and they probably should have recorded something with Jeff, but they moved on. And I think Arnell has been a very durable and decent lead singer, in addition to a really good in-concert frontman, which the band, I think, really needed. They needed somebody who could carry the torch. By the way, Jeff Scott Soto, was a great frontman as well. Steve Augeri was okay as a frontman. I mean, just to have somebody different than Steve Perry was so much of a shock to the old time fans at that moment that, you know, I wouldn't want to be Steve Augeri, you know, but we've had so many years after the fact that a lot of your casual fans and what I would call new fans are really excited. They're really happy about Journey in the year 2022. The second leg of their tour is coming up. I think they'll probably announce more dates even after that. Like I said yesterday in a video, rumor has it that they might team up with Def Leppard again in the future. And Neil Sean is absolutely right about this song. It sounds like Journey, and that should be a celebration and not a complaint where someone says, well, it oddly sounds like Separate Ways. Okay, so that's a bad thing, right? It shouldn't sound like anything from their past, because you know what? We might have to start playing it. We might have to admit that this song is so good that we can't ignore it. And I would say this is their strongest song in a very long time. So that's my opinion. Yours might be different. I'm not all things Journey, by the way. I do videos about other topics, but I do like to talk about Journey because they are still a really big deal. And I would also suggest that if you can go see this band performing live this year, do it. Definitely do it. They are on their game. The show is amazing. The set list is top notch, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. All right, that's my video. Not paid for by Neil Sean or John Kane or anybody, just my own opinion. And these guys are doing well. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.